to grow. Hello, my name is Bethany Daves. I teach at Northwest Elementary School and I teach fourth grade. Today we're going to be looking at teaching how to continue growing your passion in education. We're going to first look at why am I a teacher. Please watch the video.
We the real world changers, because I had a group of educators who spoke life into me, and I'm looking at the impact I'm making across the world. And if they could just see me now, if they could just see what their sacrifice produced, if they could see what their hard work produced, if they could see what their love produced, if they could see what their faith produced. And the problem with most educators and people of influence over this newer generation today, the problem with most of them is they don't have eyes of faith. I'm that student where I had struggles in schools, like I'm that guy. My mom had me when she was 16 years old. I went through all sorts of struggles and failures, drug and alcohol abuse. My story is long. Diagnosed with ADHD. I went to 3 different schools for the 9th grade. And so when I go to the schools, I'm telling them your condition is not your conclusion. Like where you are right now, that's temporary. Many of the young students I work with, I'm in all these schools all over America. Y'all know I'm on a mission to reach 1 million students this year. I'm letting them know, like, your DNA doesn't determine your destiny, your decisions do. I'm thinking of all the students here in California, all the students here in Reading, in Fresno, like all these students, many of them would rather work in the field than be in school because they don't value education. If I can just get my hands on them and let them know, like, man, there is so much power and value in education. And though I haven't touched them right now, I can touch you, and you're the real change makers. So my message to you, you look at someone like me, I had issues. I promise you, I once was lost, but now I'm fine. And I'm experiencing something different now. And you see the value of education. Those educators who showed us every single day, and they poured into me, and they encouraged me, and they loved on me, and they let me do whatever. They gave me a hard time, they challenged me, but it was because of love. Like, I could feel it. Like, these students not done, you're not done. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can tell if somebody really don't like you, like if they're just tolerating you. And I've got a group of educators that was like, no, I'm excited to be here, Jeremy. This is going to be your year. And because they spoke life to me on a continual basis, you know what I did? I believed them. I eventually let that wall down, and I began to work with those who wanted to work with me. Now when you look at me now, and I just finished my 7th book. Our team, we just wrote a curriculum, next level students. I'm thinking like, what do I had troubles reading when I was in school. What do I got? I got no business writing books and curriculums and being a published author. Like, what does that look like? I've been in South Africa. I can't tell you how many times over the past 2 years. Australia 3 times in the past 3 years, speaking for conferences. I've been to Bangalore, India. Like, I'm thinking like, how are people finding me? Like, what am I doing? You know what I'm doing? It's the seed that was planted start growing. Those educators who spoke years into me 10, 15, 20 years ago, those seeds start growing. And I just continue to press forward. I still hear what they were telling me. I still hear the challenges. I still hear the words of affirmation. And so what you do, every single day, you just keep putting that work in. You keep showing up. You keep serving. And you got no clue what you're going to experience. It's like a mental fight. But I believe that if we stay faithful, I believe that we're consistent with that. The work that we do is eventually going to take place in their lives. These kids are looking for more. And you are that more. So you might not have the cape, you might not have the spider webs coming out of here, you might not have the hammer, you might not that Iron Man boy, like, you might not have that. You might not turn into a Hulk, like, you might not be a superhero like that. But let me tell you something, like, all that stuff fictional. Y'all the real superheroes.
So, how many of you have seen this video before? How many of you relate to our speaker? I remember when I first wanted to become a teacher. It was after I had my 5th grade teacher, Miss Birtwistle. Miss Birtwistle for me was my hero. She opened my eyes to a world of teaching that no other teacher I had before had ever done. She made me feel loved, safe, and important in her room. She believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. You see, we all wanted to become a teacher because of someone else who influenced us. It is a calling. However, that does not mean that this job is not challenging. We have our moments, in all honesty, where we may question if we made the right choice with our career path. In this slideshow, we are going to be looking at ways to continue to grow in our passion for education and ways to help where we can apply this in our professional career. If you can, get a sticky note or a pack of sticky notes nearby. I want you to grab one and think in a pen and answer the question that I had on this slide. Is why am I a teacher? And when you are done answering it, I want you to just hold on to your sticky notes. Maybe at the end of this presentation, since we're doing it virtual, if you could just take a picture and email it to me, because I am sending this slideshow via email. If you could just send me a picture of your sticky note or write what you put, that would be awesome. So, what will we be going over today? When I sat down and was thinking about what I want to talk to you guys about today, I looked first at the data from the survey I sent out to you all. One thing I noticed about the results from the survey is that there is a huge need to grow in teaching skills. You guys want a professional development where you can take it and use it today. That is what you'll be able to do with this information. We're going to be looking at quite a few things today to help you to continue your growth and passion in education without burning out. First, we're going to be looking at preventing teacher burnout. The second thing we're going to be looking at is how you can channel your enthusiasm and passion for education to make it something useful to use with the students in your class. The final thing we'll be looking at is tools to help make your job a little less stressful and find more time to rejuvenate yourself. We will show you how you can use these tools as well. What is teacher burnout? Let's watch this video.
We all know that teachers don't go into teaching to get rich or famous. Teachers go into teaching because they have a passion for it. So why do so many feel stressed or burned out? Why do so many teachers who love their jobs still feel overwhelmed? It's important to understand the reasons for stress and burnout and why so many teachers are affected.
So it's interesting when you think about teaching, it is of all the professions, one of the most complex and one of the most challenging. There's even one author, Lee Shulman, who past president of the Carnegie Foundation, who for years worked in medical education and teacher education, who made an interesting observation. He said that most physicians would never experience what a teacher does unless they were in an emergency room after a natural disaster. And that just speaks to the complexity of having to deal with multiple clients, if you will, and add to that all of the contextual factors that surround the life of a teacher, the never-ending demands for changing this, fixing that, improving test scores, implementing a new curriculum, all of those changes that are most part outside the teacher's control. Then there are the community contexts. Some teachers, for example, when you think about teacher stress, some work in very challenging environments in the sense that they're working with children who, when they look into their lives, they see things that they would never want to happen to any child. And that can, over time, become very stressful, just to see the young people having to go through what they're having to go through.
Teachers care about their students and often empathize with them when they know their lives are hard. Over time, that can take its toll, leading to empathy fatigue or empathic distress.
So I would contrast empathic distress with an empathy fatigue with compassion. And so in compassion, the way that we define it in the Stanford CCT program is that compassion is an awareness of suffering coupled with a willingness to take action to relieve the suffering. And so empathy is one piece of the compassion response. And the reason why it's important to recognize it as one piece is if we stay stuck in the empathic response and feeling with another person, resonating on an emotional level with them, that can lead to burnout because it's not an empowered position. It's based on, if you move out of your struggle, then I will feel better because I'm emotionally resonating with you. There's some research coming out that's recently come out of Max Planck Institute in Germany, showing the different brain regions associated with empathy and compassion. Empathy is a self-referential associated with reward centers. So similar to when we eat chocolate, there are certain regions of the brain that light up when we eat chocolate, and they're finding that that's actually the same pleasure centers of the brain that light up when we're having a compassionate response. So empathy is more self-involved, because your pain then becomes my pain, and then it becomes about me more. And so it's an interesting inquiry, because empathy is so crucial to understanding the other and caring about the other, and yet it can be a little bit of a sticking point.
When we think about sort of the long-term and short-term effects of stress, empathic distress can be a short-term episodic thing where you have this moment where you're just overwhelmed with sadness and a feeling of a lack of efficacy to really do anything about the problem. That's one thing. When stress becomes chronic and it becomes long-term and people are living in it over time, it really can become debilitating, because during that time, people tend to lose the capacity to really objectively observe themselves. They may begin to distort reality and see problems in their organization or with their fellow teachers or with their students or with their parents that don't really exist. But it's their way of coping with the fact that they really are stuck. And when people are stuck in this way, they can become very oriented on the past. How come things aren't the way they used to be? And I wish they were, and I'm sort of angry that they're not. And they also can become very future-oriented, like, I've got to find a way out of here. That's the kind of chronic, long-term stress that leads to burnout, which is a very, very serious condition. We throw the word burnout around, but one doesn't get burned out on Tuesday, and then they're fine on Wednesday. Burnout really is a long-term psychological and physiological state that's not a good place to be, and quite frankly, it can lead to actual depression.
Paradoxically, the characteristics of a good teacher, including the ability to juggle multiple demands and the gift of empathizing with students, can leave teachers vulnerable to stress and burnout. Up next, the role of mindfulness in addressing stress in the classroom. We all know that teachers...
So what I want to talk about from that previous video is that we have all experienced stress before. And especially as educators, you know, I want you to reflect back on a time when you may have felt overwhelmed and stressed out by this career path you chose. So I'm going to stop for a minute and let you reflect on that. Okay, I think we all seem to have a time when we have felt overwhelmed and stressed by this job that we love so much. It seems that has happened to some so much they have left this type of career due to it. What I want to talk about in the next slide is ways that we can prevent teacher burnout and to make you feel less stressed. In this slide, we're going to talk about some ways that you can take with you today and immediately start using to lower the amount of stress you have. The first thing is that you do not have to feel passionate about everything that you teach. In Dave Burgess's book, he talks about how it is okay not to be passionate about every single thing you teach. And the book he writes is called Teach Like a Pirate, which you see on the screen in front of you. He breaks up passion into 3 types. There's content passion, there's professional passion, and personal passion. In the next slide, we're going to watch Dave Burgess talk more about these passions and how to keep yours alive as a teacher. When I read his book and when I read his book and read this part, it opened my eyes that I do not have stress about my lessons. If I break it down into 3 categories, I can become passionate about it. The second thing is to find someone who can trust completely to talk to and be vulnerable to. You always need someone to share how you are feeling about your job. It's better to find someone who can relate. By finding a coworker who you can relate to allows you to share your feelings and think through what and why something is stressing you out. Teachers need to know that they are supported. The final thing is to help prevent burnout is to not make education your life. It is important that you make personal time for yourself and do not spend all your time about your job. This makes it hard to divide the lines. Do not take calls from work at home. Do not research items when you should be spending time with family. Take that bubble bath and read a book that is not education related. It is okay to say no and make time for yourself. We're going to watch clips of this video. After the video, I'm going to have you guys just reflect on 3 things you may have learned. And you can email these at the end along with your why you're a teacher. It's not that great audio.
I set a world record for you this morning. Does that set a world record for you? At least my personal record. My personal record is 28 points. My attitude with a 2-digit number, 28.7 seconds with a bottle of mine. Here's, I need someone who has maybe a timer on their watch or phone. They might be out here. Who can have their phone on their watch or a timer? I get somebody working on that. And then I need some help from someone else. Right here. Will you give me any 2-digit number over 30, please? Any 2-digit number over 30? Yeah, tell me what it is. 67? Would you like to change your mind? 67 it is. All right, so I'm going to make big 67. I'm back to this word right here. 67. Now, do you have someone who's got time for me? Do you have time for me? Here's what I want you to do. When I say go, I want you to start the timer. If it's 10 seconds, I want you to say 10. If it's 20 seconds,
we're going to skip this part of the video.
Presentation. Sure, you know your content, and you have all these techniques and methods. Now, how are you going to present that in such a fashion that it draws kids in and makes kids want to be there, makes kids want to learn? That's the third circle that I know what it's talking about. And I have an evangelical zeal to travel as far and wide to talk to teachers about that third circle of presentation. Just in this short little thing right here. Let's talk about presentation. This is what I said. I'm trying to set up personal right here. It's positioned right away as something. This is a record. We're going to be timing this right here. That's something to try, right? And then I put it like this. I'm going to add some numbers. I'll let you know what I'm asking you for you. If I just square it, what's going to have that. So, this is another 14.5. That's 67. I'll also need to be presented 37 and 15 and 67 too. And now this book is a little more complicated. I'm looking at the actions of the various columns and items. So it's more than 10 to 7. Is that the same lesson? It's got all the same teachers. That is not the same lesson. It's not even close to the same lesson, is it? One thing will put you to sleep, and one thing will you applause. It's presentation. It's the third circle that matters sometimes, right? Other presentational decisions. I did it like this. You can't smile what you want to know. What is he doing back there? Presentational decision. Set it aside, so let's move on. You got to say, wait, no. You want to see that. Changes the dynamic of the situation now, right? Presentational decision. I downplayed what I did at first. What is totally efficient? I don't cost more like this. Wait, waiting for you to be nice and blah. Some places might really don't. And it showed you increasing levels of complexity of what I did in the 13.6 seconds. And all the while, building my enthusiasm for what's happening here, and get into a climactic point where I break with me, slow it down, and at that moment, you're almost forced to progress, it almost seems rude. That's what a presentation can do. In fact, when I perform at a magic show, so it's a workshop, this is the second place I get paid to do that in performance. Okay? And it's all because of presentation. So how do you come up with presentational ideas that will cause creativity? What makes creativity? What happens is that some people fall victims to the myth of the language flash of life. And that is that there's creative people out there who are creative people out there like this, and all of a sudden, there's another one. These ideas. People that are not creative. They questions like, I'm here to tell you that that is not the way that creativity works. Creativity is not something that is the sole realm of a certain genius quality or person or something like that. Creativity is open and available to anyone who actively engages and immerses themselves in the creative process. And the creative process is nothing much more, I believe, than the process of asking the right questions. I look at it like Google, great things like Google. Imagine going to Google, and it's kind of the cursor connection there, and you stare at it and go like, I thought this place was amazing. I can help me find anything, but I'm not getting anything here. And then you get mad, turn off the computer and say, this place doesn't work. You know what? That's exactly what people do with their mind. They say, you know, I need these creative ways to present my lessons. I'm not getting anything out of not creative, and they stop. They never enter anything into the search bar. And what you're getting into the search bar is questions. Questions help focus on questions are like that tuning of the radio station to improve the frequency. And you have static, create static, and then just the right question features perfectly. All of a sudden, ideas will come in clearly. So when someone comes to me with a lesson and says, hey, fix this lesson, I don't think it's better, it's not working. I can't wave a magic wand over it. What I do is I pummel with questions. So I say, all right, let's continue to teach this lesson together. Are you ready to go? Here we go. Because there's something we can write on our board, or share on our screen, and start a conversation and create a buzz with both about English. Is there some way that we can get our class outside of this lesson? Where would be the perfect place on campus to deliver this lesson? I inject a kinesthetic activity where every student has an speaker or something like this lesson. Can I object, chance for artistic expression, some sort of art or craft, or some sort of way students can follow their artistic passions in this lesson? Can I make this lesson an amazing practical activity where they're challenging each other and trying to raise their tools to a national treasure to achieve those situations, where they're solving clues and they're coming up to the next key. Can I use the amazing power of silence? Dictionary, charades, I have little placards, I have message links, little placards like those videos for strange and engaging. Is there some way that I can turn this into a context? Is there something that I can do with a book? Is there something that I can do myself, transform myself, immediately spark curiosity as they enter the room? Is there something I can do to transform my space? Can I change my room in such a way to deliver this lesson? Can I use the people in my class as props? And I create like a human graph out of the people, we demonstrate all these things. I can just question. It's questions that lead to presentational touches to the lesson that draw people in. It's a question for them. And then the answers come after that. Okay? So that's the way it works. You ask the questions first, and then the answers come. Creative insight and creative ability is absolutely and completely open to every single one of you. It's absolutely open. But it just takes that work on the front end. Now, what I would like to do now is I'd like to do something really crazy. But I'm going to try something here with you. I'm going to open my phone up. And by the way, if you have a phone with you, I would like you to have access to that in a second. So if you get your phone out, you have a phone, you can have access to it. Okay? Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to step right here, and I'm going to open up a calculator on my phone. So when you show me, you don't feel very covered. What does it say on my screen there? It says 0, so it's 0 out. Here's what I'd like you to do. I would like you to enter a 3-digit number in your calculator. So just leave a 3-digit number. Excellent. Will you press the multiply sign? Will you enter a 3-digit number as well? We're going to press equals yet. We're going to do something else. Excellent. Now come back here. Will you press divided by? Okay. And will you enter a 2-digit number? And will you press equals? Tell me what that number says. 7,472.83. You have something right where write that down right now. 7,472.83. What I do right there, does that seem pretty fair? My hands on the side of the phone, we start at 0. A 3-digit number multiplied by a 3-digit number divided by a 2-digit number. We got 7,472.83. I've got a question for you. That's been sitting up here the whole time. If I turn that board around, and it said 7,472.83, would that be pretty amazing? Yes? Now, this is a complicated thing we're trying to do here. Just understand there's a high rate of failure cost. But you know what? I think that's what we need in education. Teachers who are willing to take a risk. Teachers who are pilots. People are willing to step into uncharted territories and uncharted waters with no guarantee of success. A map won't do it in today's world. Absolutely won't. What you need is just a compass and some guts. We need teachers that are willing to leave the safety of the shores, the comfort zone of the shore, and step out. The waves are changing right now. We need people that are mavericks and renegades and willing to try new things. And so I'm taking a risk for you today. I hope that it pays off. Remember, 7,472.83, is that right? Ladies and gentlemen. I really do think this is the answer. We do need pirates. We need people that are willing to fly their flags and defiance. But you know what? Open up your telephone keypad. If you were going to dial this number, I want you to tell me what you would get. If you dial a P, what would you get? 7. What about 5? 4. What about R? What about the A? What about the T? By the way, that's my right there. 8. What about the E? The answer of our educational future is being willing to take a risk, being willing to be a pirate, being willing to be a renegade, a maverick, someone who's daring and adventurous, willing to try new things. We need you out there. Hopefully you'll be a pirate with me. Thank you.
I always love this video because just the ending, and I had to show that to you guys because I think it's true that we really need to be pirates in education. We don't need to go out and steal and plunder, but we need to be willing to go into those uncharted territories of education to, really bring our students to something exciting. Yeah, it's worth a risk and it may not work out, but it's worth it. So if you would, I'd love it if you would share 3 things you have learned from this video. Like I said, you can include that in that email. It'd just be really great to hear your invoice on that. So now we're going to go on to the next slide. And we've looked at ways to help prevent burnout. We are going to now look at ways that we can motivate students. The first on this is to be enthusiastic about your job. Dave Ehrlich just talked about in his video and in his book, Teach Like a Pirate, that there are 2 ways to do enthusiasm. The first is that you can act as if you are enthusiastic. It can be faked. He says, even if you are only acting at first, an amazing thing happens along the way. You actually start to really feel and become enthusiastic because your breath pattern and the way you are holding and moving your body. You begin to feel more powerful and confident with what you are doing, and it will rub off onto your students, causing them to be the same. The second thing is to build meaningful relationships with your students. The best way to do this is to pass out an interest survey or do an all about me paper to learn about what your students like or dislike. This will lead to wonderful conversations with your students. You may also find that you have things in common with them yourself. I have an example of a student survey to the right of the slideshow. I also have links to 2 different surveys below when I send this presentation to you guys. These surveys are printed out these surveys can be printed out and passed out the first day. And just to give you an idea of what I do in my students' interest surveys, I really put on flashcards, what my students responded, their name, their sibling, what's their favorite color, and I write blue beside that. And I go home and I study those, and I make sure that I really, really know my students. And the final thing is you can create a community for learners. Students want to come to school to know that they are safe and loved. By making sure your classroom is that environment, allows them to feel empowered to take control of their learning. They will become enthusiastic and motivated to want to work. In the next slide, we are going to hear from students about what they love most about school and their teachers and what motivates them.
I would like to think that I am. Some days it's a struggle. Another thing sometimes is just that, we do all these different things and we have so much on our plates. There's always going to be that one day where we're like, today was not a good day. But I think the important thing is, and to show our students is that, hey, we may all have bad days, and that's okay. we can still impact our day. We can still impact other people's days by what we choose to do. And if we have a bad day, we can just brush it off and get started again the next day.
I do for a lot of them. I really do. And like I said, it's big in those relations. I'm really going to try to get to know my students. I don't look at them as just names or students in desk. I want to get to know them as people. And if you do that, you can get a lot out of them. You can make some really big impacts.
I do. Most days feel like I'm making an impact. The learning environment fun and my classroom environment welcoming to my students and know that they are safe when they walk through my door.
Thank the Lord for whomever invented Post-it notes, because they will borrow my little Post-it notes off my desk and say, may I have one of these? Yes, of course. And then they'll be over there. I'm thinking they're making little sticky notes for, Romeo and Juliet. And then I'll walk out to hall duty and I'll come back, and my computer monitor and the tower and my printer are covered with notes from people who tell me I have made a difference.
I want to tell you about my teacher, Miss Uckles. She is a wonderful teacher. Let me tell you about her. She lets us have free time. She lets us know what we need to know. Anything I need to spell, she always helps me. She is kind. She is very smart. I love my teacher. Love. One day she had laughed because she heard a funny joke on the paper, and she told us, and it was so funny. My teacher is my favorite teacher in the world. She is so nice. She gave me everything, either a Scarborough. She helped us with our work. She is the most beautiful teacher in the world. Thank you, Miss Eccles, for doing all the work for us and trying to get us ready for 4th grade. I love you, Miss Eccles.
Mr. Turbin has been my teacher for the past 2 years. He has taught me in AP Statistics and AP Calculus. I will honestly say he is the best teacher to prepare you for your exams. I made a 5 on my exam, and I never could have done that without him. He always makes sure that his classroom is open to somebody to where he will go and explain deeper and really grow that connection with people. Even though he loves to pick on me and always tries to catch me for being late, I know that he really does care for us, and he puts in the work. He makes sure that all of his students understand, and then he goes in after them to make sure that they do understand the work that he has. And outside of the classroom, he makes sure that he wants us to reach our dreams. He wrote my acceptance letter to my college, and he was allowing me to reach my dreams into who I want to be. So without Mr. Turbin, I could not be going into the future I want, and I hope that one day all of his efforts will show in all of the success that I have. So to Mr. Turbin, I thank you for all of your effort that you've given us, and I hope that we will make you proud one day.
Dear Ms. Roberts, I remember the day I first entered your classroom. You were a bundle of nerves and joy hopping around the room excited to teach. I listened as you rambled on about your excitement for our futures and how you expected each of us to reach even beyond our fullest potential. I don't know how, but you managed to make a rainy, dreary Monday morning into a strong anticipation for the next step of life. On days I felt suffocated, you left me space to breathe. You encouraged my love for reading. Instead of snatching my books away, you asked about the events of the story and asked me what I thought of writing my own. Your classroom is one of laughter and jokes and most of all willingness. Willingness to let us laugh, let us tell our jokes, and let us learn in a way that is suitable for each of us as individuals. There's always extra milk in the fridge, an extra cup on the desk, or an extra plastic utensil for us to use when we need them. You always lend an extra smile in the mornings and when we enter the classroom. Most of all, you teach us the basics of what we need to know to conquer the world we want to grow into. For all the instruction on how to word emails, for respecting my boundaries, and most importantly, for treating us like actual human beings, I like to say thank you.
I just love that child. Love that child.
Dear Mrs. Martin, you are the best teacher because you do not leave us on our own to figure it out on our own. You also teach us about phonics and talk about following rules. You help us spell spelling words if we need help spelling them. You also give us recess and time on the Chromebook, and we can watch videos, and when you help people, they are happy.
Yeah, I feel excited to learn.
when we have to do math, it's very fun. Like, she makes it fun and puts videos into it. She's kind, she's helpful, she tells us what to do, and she teaches us, she loves us, and she cares for us. She does this often. She writes on my paper when we do a good job. She writes on our paper and tells us awesome or other things. I tell her a joke. That's what I normally do. Like a few days ago when we were going out to recess, I asked her a question. I asked her a joke, and she was like, what? I told her, thank you, Miss Martin.
She's so cute.
Dear Miss Martin, you are the best teacher ever, because when you tell us to do something and we need help, you help us, and you are caring, and you help people, and you are very nice. When people need help, you help them, and you tell us to follow rules when we are in trouble, or when we get in trouble somewhere. You help us spell words if we need help spelling them, and when you help people, they are happy. I was ready to learn once we got back and we started learning and stuff. When we came in the classroom, Miss Martin is the best teacher ever. She is very caring and very nice. When she helps people, when someone raises their hand because they need help, she doesn't say you can do it by yourself. She comes over and helps them. You are the best teacher ever because you care for people and you're very nice.
Thank you. That took makes the struggles worth it. Oh, man.
That's awesome. That's why I do it. It's that right there.
Oh my gosh.
We asked Mariah to write a letter to you.
Oh my gosh.
And that's what she had to say to you because you are her favorite teacher.
Oh my gosh, how sweet. I love her. I seriously love her.
It makes me feel good. You know, it makes me feel that even though there may be those rough days, that I am making an impact to at least some of my students.
Every time I watch this, I get teary-eyed watching it because it is really, something that we look at. I have a container of things I have gotten in my classroom from students, and that mean a lot to me. And I always go look back at them when I'm having a rough day. And this video is one of those things, too, where I go back and look at or listen to remind myself why I do this. So I want you to sit and reflect on what do you think your students would say about you. The next thing I want you to think about is, do you feel that you give your all into your students? Is there anything you think you can improve on? Because as our leader has expressed to us, is that there's always room for growth. We can always continue each day and reflect and try to do better the next day. And that's what I want you to think about, is if you're giving your all to your students. And it really shows by how that your relationship with them is, and it really reflects. So one thing discussed about earlier is preventing burnout. One way to do this as well is to manage your time. To-do lists are a great tool to use to help you manage your time and know what to focus on. They are linked above. There's also an example of one to the right. The second resource I highly recommend is to read Teach Like a Pirate. It really motivates you to think and reflect about your job and why you chose it to begin with. It is linked to Amazon above. The final tool I'm giving is also think about starting a journal and reflecting on your teaching. I have a handout linked above that talks more about how to begin or become a reflective teacher. There's also an example to the right. By doing this will allow you to look back at lessons and teaching that you loved and see what you would or would not want to change. we have come now to the end of our presentation. We're going to watch one final video before we end. Just know that I am here for you and can come assist in any way that you need. I assist with any help with lessons in the classroom, help set up your classroom library, show you ways to organize your room, help set up your classroom, be a listening ear, and showing how to do reading or conference or a small group. Before we watch this video, we're going to watch this video and then I have one final thing to say.
I have spent my entire life either at the schoolhouse, on the way to the schoolhouse, or talking about what happens in the schoolhouse. Both my parents were educators. My maternal grandparents were educators. And for the past 40 years, I've done the same thing. And so needless to say, over those years, I've had a chance to look at education reform from a lot of perspectives. Some of those reforms have been good, some of them have been not so good. And we know why kids drop out. We know why kids don't learn. It's either poverty, low attendance, negative peer influences. We know why. But one of the things that we never discuss, or we rarely discuss, is the value and importance of human connection. Relationships. James Comer says that no significant learning can occur without a significant relationship. George Washington Carver says all learning is understanding relationships. Everyone in this room has been affected by a teacher or an adult. For years, I have watched people teach. I have looked at the best and I've looked at some of the worst. A colleague said to me one time, they don't pay me to like the kids. They pay me to teach a lesson. The kids should learn it. I should teach it. They should learn it. Case closed. Well, I said to her, you know, kids don't learn from people they don't like. She said, that's just a bunch of hooey. And I said to her, well, your year is going to be long and arduous, dear. Needless to say, it was. Some people think that you can either have it in you to build a relationship or you don't. I think Stephen Covey had the right idea. He said you ought to just throw in a few simple things, like seeking first to understand as opposed to being understood. Simple things like apologizing. You ever thought about that? Tell a kid you're sorry, they're in shock. I taught a lesson once on ratios. I'm not real good with math, but I was working on it. And I got back and looked at that teacher edition. I taught the whole lesson wrong. So I came back to class the next day and I said, look, guys, I need to apologize. I taught the whole lesson wrong. I'm so sorry. They said, that's okay, Miss Pearson. You were so excited. We just let you go. I have had classes that were so low, so academically deficient that I cried. I wondered, how am I going to take this group in 9 months from where they are to where they need to be? And it was difficult. It was awfully hard. How do I raise the self-esteem of a child and his academic achievement at the same time? One year I came up with a bright idea. I told all my students, you were chosen to be in my class. Because I am the best teacher and you are the best students, they put us all together so we could show everybody else how to do it. One of the students said, really? I said, really? We have to show the other classes how to do it. So when we walk down the hall, people will notice us. So you can't make noise, you just have to strut. And I gave them a saying to say, I am somebody. I was somebody when I came. I'll be a better somebody when I leave. I am powerful and I am strong. I deserve the education that I get here. I have things to do, people to impress, and places to go. And they said, yeah. You say it long enough, it starts to be a part of you. And so I gave a quiz, 20 questions. Student missed 18. I put a +2 on this paper and a big smiley face. He said, Miss Pearson, is this an F? I said, yes. He said, then why'd you put a smiley face? I said, because you on the roll. You got 2 right, you didn't miss them all. I said, and when we review this, won't you do better? He said, yes, ma'am, I can do better. You see, -18 sucks all the life out of you. +2 said, I ain't all bad. For years, I watched my mother take the time at recess to review, go on home visits in the afternoon, buy combs and brushes and peanut butter and crackers to put in a desk drawer for kids that needed to eat, and a washcloth and some soap for the kids who didn't smell so good. See, it's hard to teach kids who stink. And kids can be cruel. And so she kept those things in her desk, and years later, after she retired, I watched some of those same kids come through and say to her, you know, Miss Walker, you made a difference in my life. You made it work for me. You made me feel like I was somebody when I knew at the bottom I wasn't. And I want you to just see what I've become. And when my mama died 2 years ago at 92, there were so many former students at her funeral. It brought tears to my eyes, not because she was gone, but because she left a legacy of relationships that could never disappear. Can we stand to have more relationships? Absolutely. Will you like all your children? Of course not. And you know your toughest kids are never absent. Never. You won't like them all, and the tough ones show up for a reason. It's the connection, it's the relationships. And while you won't like them all, the key is they can never, ever know it. So teachers become great actors and great actresses, and we come to work when we don't feel like it, and we listen to policy that doesn't make sense, and we teach anyway. We teach anyway because that's what we do. Teaching and learning should bring joy. How powerful would our world be if we had kids who were not afraid to take risks, who were not afraid to think, and who had a champion? Every child deserves a champion, an adult who will never give up on them, who understands the power of connection and insists that they become the best that they can possibly be. Is this job tough? You betcha. Oh, God, you betcha. But it is not impossible. We can do this. We're educators. We're born to make a difference. Thank you so much.
I just want to say I hope you all have a wonderful year, and please feel free to reach out with me with any questions. Thank you so much for your time, and have a great day.